Today I'm going to do something quite different. For those of you who've seen me talk before, I normally litter the screen with slides and so on. I want to run this session like a seminar. And if it's going to work, you've got to participate. There's no good hiding. Now, with such a small number, I can spot the people who are keeping their heads down, all right? Let me tell you a bit about me. I'm a mining engineer. I started in the coal mining industry. For any of you that know the Bolsover area, the big pit by the side of the M1, Markham Colliery is where I worked. And I came down to Camborne, to the School of Mines in '71 and taught rock mechanics, mining engineering for 15 years, from the old building in Camborne to Trevenson. And my speciality is rock mechanics, so I work on deep underground rock strengths, temperatures, fluids and flows, and that got me into geothermal energy, treating the heat of the ground just simply as a resource to mine, as a product. Now, I'm not going to talk about geothermal energy per se in my session just now. I'll come back to that towards the end. So, what I'd like to do is take the theme of our morning this morning, do one thing, and unlike Darrow and Amelie, I focused on the do one thing, but actually, tremendous introduction in the sessions by Darrow and Amelie, because you actually have picked up and highlighted several of the points. Now, what I'd like to ask, does anybody know what the motto of the Royal Society is? Don't be shy. Nullus in verbia. Anyone know what that means? Take nobody's word for it. Now, you heard Amelie say greenwash and the rest of it. Promise me you won't take my word for anything I'm going to say this morning. That is a fabulous expression. Do enough to prove to yourself that you believe or you think something's true. We are bombarded with incorrect information. So, take nobody's word for it is a fabulous starting point for what I'm going to do. Now, my comments, my first question to you is aimed at the 20-somethings. When are you going to retire? What year do you think you're going to retire? As soon as possible. Well, if you're 20-something now, it's going to be 2060, isn't it? Now, that's 10 years after a date that is thrown at us continuously, 2050, where we're supposed to have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide, methane, water vapour, don't forget water vapour, it's a key part of all this. By 2050, we're supposed to be at least an 80% reduction by 2050. That's wonderful for today's politicians to say. They're not going to be here. What it means is your entire working life is going to be dominated by how we do this. You've got Karen sitting there doing her carbon balance for this place. That must be a real struggle. But think of it, 80% reduction in our carbon emissions by 2050 for your entire working life. You will not escape it. You can hide, you can do whatever you want. You are going to be forced to be looking at processes that use much less, that produce much less emissions. You're a self-selected group today, so you're already the A team. Now, the world is relying on you to solve this problem. Our generation has given you a very bad hand. So you've got to solve that problem because we haven't given you a good starting point. Now, I'd like to pick up on a comment that Amelie made in answer to one of the questions, and Darrow had up on one of his slides. Who are the causes? Who is the cause, the principal cause of the greenhouse emissions today? Yeah, absolutely. Us as individuals. We, the individuals, are the cause. Now, you were talking about corporates and individuals in the previous session. Actually, if people aren't buying products, corporates aren't going to be selling. So Amelie's comment about the wallet is your best weapon, that's going to change things. The market, they will respond to the market. But the key thing is you come in feeling a bit chilly, switch the heater on, that's the cause of pollution. It isn't the power station or the gas field or whatever, it's that action on our part. Darrow mentioned, how on earth do we get people to make that conversion and make that transformation? And that's a big challenge that's coming. Dieter Helm at Oxford has been pressing on the consumer is the polluter for some time, but you don't actually see it coming into mainstream thinking. People are still thinking, well, I switch the lights on and the emissions are at the power station. You hear people talking about electric cars being emission-free. It's total rubbish. You've got to generate the electric somewhere. Where does the hydrogen come from for hydrogen power vehicles? There's a whole series of muddled thinking that's in there. But if you agree that it's you, that's a very good starting point. So you're the polluter. So let's look at what we know about energy. Again, picking up on Darrow's point about being educated. How much hot water do you use a day as an individual? Anybody know? It's about 50 litres. So 50 litres of hot water. Now, that's a mix of showers and hand washing and everything else. And I could go on to talk about kilowatts and everything else. Let's talk about the energy that goes into that. And you hear people talk, megawatt hours, kilowatt hours and the rest of it. What's all that mean? I want to introduce a new unit today. It's called the kettle, and the kettle energy use. So a kilowatt hour, when you hear people talk about kilowatt hours, that's about 3 kettle uses. So for 20 minutes, a kettle running for 20 minutes is a kilowatt hour. So a kettle running for an hour is 3 kilowatt hours. So we're going to talk about kettle units, because you can picture what a kettle's doing. And typically, you're going to use, of the order, 50 litres, that will use about 365 kettles a year when you work it out. And let's look at how you might change the use of your hot water. Now we're looking at 80%, so that's going to be tough. But how much energy would you save if you didn't have a shower one day a week? Come on, you can all do 1/7 as a percentage, for about 15%. And what if you, instead of showering for 5 minutes, you showered for 4 minutes, 30 seconds? And that is gosh, you're all slow this morning. Come on, 10%. So that's 25% just through dropping out a shower and showering for slightly less. So you've already got a 25% saving just there for the taking. And David Mackay, who wrote the book Sustainability Without Hot Air, who is the government chief scientist at the Department of Energy, although you wouldn't think we had a chief scientist if you read yesterday's rubbishy energy statement, has been practicing doing what he can on his own house. And he has been steadily whittling it away just by making small changes. And that's a key point that we saw earlier on with both Amelie and Darrow. Underlying some of the stuff is lifestyle changes. So you're in the habit of a shower every day, drop out a shower, okay? You're in the habit of a longish shower, shorten the shower. You're making small lifestyle changes, but they aren't costing you anything. So that's just on the hot water. Let's look at the heating in the buildings. Most of us, well, our energy use is associated with the use of buildings. And typically, a fairly well-built modern house with 2 or 3 people in is using about 20,000 kilowatt hours a year, or some 6,000 or 7,000 kettle hours in that sense. Now, where's that energy going? Most of us don't have air conditioning at home, so let's assume we're using it for heating. Forget the hot water for a minute. So we're heating our houses up from the average outside air temperature to something we want to sit in. 20, 21, 22, 23 degrees with your jumper off and in your blouses. And the average air temperature in Cornwall is 9 degrees. So you're actually heating the air or heating the house from 9, say, to 20, 21 degrees. So you're about 12 degrees. So turning your thermostat down by 2 degrees, down to say 19 or 20, is a really big saving on energy in the house. Now, I think it was Darrow had turn your thermostats down, but actually just 1 or 2 degrees is really significant, because the amount of heat you're putting in to raise the temperature in the room is quite small in that sense. The amount of temperature rise, so a small change in the temperature is going to give you a fairly big saving. So who of you have actually done that? All right? And what do? Wear thicker jumpers? Yeah. And it's not that bad, is it? It becomes lifestyle, doesn't it? But the impact is significant.
My wife was wearing gloves at breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
It's true.
I have a problem at my house. I have mum and mum-in-law. Mum-in-law's 92. And she insists in sitting in a blouse. You say, come on, mum, put a jumper on. No, I want to, right? So you turn the thermostat down, and then suddenly she's cold and everything else. So I haven't won the battle in the sense of the users of the building haven't got that message. But they don't pay the bills either. So all of that, small changes, are actually quite significant. They're much, much more important than turning off your equipment on standby and all that good stuff. Equipment on standby, yes, it will save something, but it's a small effect. You actually need to do these slightly bigger effects. And do we need, what do you think the lowest temperature is that you can sit in comfortably with a jumper on and work? When do you think it begins to get a challenge? You'd be struggling down that low, actually. 15. Yeah, it's 15. But people start to say, I'm really cold and miserable and stuff at 15. 18 is not a bad figure, but you won't sit there without a jumper on, and so on. You will have a bit of a nip, but if you can do that, that's 4 degrees out of 12. It's a third of your energy being reduced at that point. Who of you knows how to use your controllers on boilers and the like? Right? Do you switch them off at night? Do you put them into setback, or do you just leave it on a program that comes on the stat?
Oh, we don't run ours to heat the building anyway, because we can't afford it.
Right. Oh, so you have it on when you want to?
Yeah, it only heats the front room anyway, so we don't leave it on.
Right. Right.
We usually use thermostats to come on at the coldest parts of the day. Basically.
Right. And do you have stats that you can actually, you don't have the room, your front room, okay, you've obviously don't heat your front room at night if you're not turning it on. But do you actually look at controlling the temperature within the space? So that, you know, your bedrooms are on when you want them on, but the downstairs isn't, but you put the downstairs on when you need to come down to one. Right, very, very few people actually do that. Some of you know my colleague Robin Curtis, and we've installed many thousands of heat pump installations. And 9 times out of 10, people just put it out, put it onto full power, and leave it on the stack, just clicking in and out, so they have heated rooms all over the place. Completely unnecessary. And 9 times out of 10, you can get a good 10–20% saving just by setting the stack properly. But people do not do it. Manufacturers don't make it that easy. Some of the controllers, particularly the German controllers, are very complex and not exactly intuitive. So, how do we attack the lifestyle problem?
Education.
It's the only way to do it. You've got to do it. You've got to proselytise it to your flatmates, family partners, and so on. I have a lot of hope. I think you younger people, because you can't afford it, basically, and particularly some of the school folk I've spoken to, really do get this. And so we've got folk coming through that can do it.
Well, the other way is to just put the price of energy up.
I'm coming to that. That's the next bit, is that you actually hit the wallet. What's today's oil price?
$107 a barrel.
Very good.
Brent crude.
Yep. You use Brent as a benchmark, all right? How much is that in a litre? Right, for other people,
159 to the
how many
barrel.
people know what a barrel is?
It's 159 litres.
42 US gallons, 37 imperial gallons, 159 litres. So, $107 a barrel, 159 litres. Let's round a few numbers up. What's it come out to be as a litre?
Is it about 70 cents? A bit less?
66 cents, yeah. And what are we going to take as an exchange rate? 160? So it's about 35 pence a litre. What's the price of a litre of mineral water in the Stannery? It's a lot more than 35p. I was in the Greenbank the other day at dinner, and it was £3.10 for if you bought a bottle of Hillingdon water. Energy is ludicrously cheap. 33 pence for a bottle of, for a litre of Brent crude. If you read the paper, $100 a barrel is a ludicrously high number. You haven't seen anything yet. The late Matt Simmons of Simmons Energy worked out that if you had to rebuild the oil industry from scratch with all new equipment and not use time expired rigs and refineries and so on, oil would be between $300 and $400 a barrel to be an economic process. You wouldn't do it at less than that. The only reason it's $100 a barrel is because we've got all this time expired infrastructure, pipelines, rigs, refineries and so on. And people are squeaking at $100 a barrel. My view is it'll be $150 a barrel on a sustained basis within 2 years. Now, the thing that has happened, and again, Darrow half referred to it this morning, the thing that has happened is that gas prices have now detached from oil prices because of this, I believe it to be an ephemeral shale gas issue, where various processes, which include hydraulic fracturing, are supposed to be solving the world's gas supply. They're not, actually. The wells are declining very rapidly, the ones that they're doing. But gas prices have become detached from oil prices. So, particularly in the States, you're going to see very low gas prices. It isn't necessarily affecting us here because we have to import 50% of our gas now. And so we're going to be seeing sustained prices. And I've forgotten who said it yesterday. Somebody was on saying gas prices are going to be increasing over the next 2 or 3 years. And there's an article in the paper this morning saying energy prices in real terms will double over the next X years, which is a response to the appalling energy statement from yesterday. So, if you're going to do one thing, I would say to you, the one thing you have to do is you have to measure what you're doing. So take your meter readings and understand what it is you're doing in your life, in your buildings, in your structures, that are causing the energy consumption. So read the electric meter, read the gas meter, and make a note of what you're actually using the energy for. And then you can say, well, I actually don't need to run that tumble dryer. Tumble dryer? I actually stop using that. I don't necessarily need to use the washing machine on that basis. I can drop out a shower and actually measure it. And it will cost you nothing. So my do one thing is measure what you're doing and understand your impact from what the various actions you're taking. Don't just come in and switch the switch. Remember what you're doing is burning the energy. So my one thing is you can't control it unless you can measure it, and to measure it you have to record it. And it's straightforward, it costs you nothing. And there's 20–25% savings on offer today for actually understanding that. And I really don't understand why people don't grab that, other than it hasn't been expensive enough. It hasn't been a focus, other than you can't afford to have the gas files on. And that, I think, was a good starting point. Then you're challenged. Because once you get to the 25–30%, you probably say 25% is easily on offer, 30% you've got to struggle. Beyond that, you've got to start spending money. And just a few words on our geothermal stuff. What I've done at home is I've reduced my energy consumption by 70%. I've put a ground source heat pump in, which does all the heating and all the hot water, into a well-insulated building. So I've spent the money on the insulation, I've spent the money on the heat pump, changed it all around. Phenomenally expensive in capital terms, but you've got to take the lifetime of the building in. I was talking to Karen earlier. We work with a care home organisation down here. 50-year lifetime of the building, only 5% of the project costs, first capital costs, was to do with the first build. 95% was the running costs, operation, maintenance. So a small change in the capex didn't affect the whole lifetime costs. Karen has a big challenge in tackling this organisation here. So, in that sense, there's all sorts of bits of technology there. I mean, obviously, clearly I'm looking at geothermal. People do not wish to buy it. Right? The market for small-scale geothermal energy has completely collapsed because the government said 2 years ago they're going to give you a grant, and then it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It's not even in yesterday's paper. So anyone who's wanting one of these systems is waiting on the grant. So the market's completely destroyed. There's a perfectly good geothermal system on here on campus in the Digital Media Centre, just one. And several of you have asked, well, we're talking geothermal right at the end, what's going on the project I'm involved with, which is over at United Downs. We haven't raised the money. We've got some of it. We've got planning permission, we've got the site, we know what we're going to do. We've got about 2/3 of the money together. We can't get the rest of it together at the moment, which is the same answer, I think, as you had from Amelie about the project up at Eden. So the two projects are sitting there with not enough money. So we're actually looking at how we might run that. And believe it or not, we get more support from Scandinavian investors and companies than we ever have done in the UK. We have an oil company, we've probably got a Scandinavian utility involved, but not here. Anyway, so my one thing is measure what you're doing and work out your impact and see if you can get to your 20% saving without even struggling. Thank you. We've sort of done it as we went along, haven't we? Yeah.
Just an observation, really. I'm keenly interested in what the price of oil is doing. I'm not so sure we can necessarily have an oil price elevated and staying at $150 a barrel, because it will screw the economy so badly, demand will fall. And we've had this in 2008. We've had it now this year, not noticed so much because the price only got up to 128, 129 a barrel. But lo and behold, the UK is back in recession and lots of other countries around the world back in recession. I don't think, certainly the developed economies, I don't think we can afford to have an economy that is more or less staying still or even growing slightly, and that high oil price.
I hear what you say. And we've already seen, and I forget what the figure is it 10% reduction in refined fuel sales in the UK since the price has been up in the 140s plus? I think the demand reduction will happen slowly. So I think it'll go up and it'll plateau, is my view. But I think it has the potential to be up in the 140, 150. I would fully agree with you if it spiked. I mean, there was discussion on the radio this morning about taking a third of the oil supply out with Iran closing the Straits of Hormuz. Well, that's an almost impossible situation. I mean, you're into rationing and all sorts. But I think it's got legs to run.
I mean, just picking up on that point, I mean, if as some analysts suggest, peak oil is happening, or at that point now, happening, then it could go anywhere. So it is up to the price of oil will be dictated more, as you suggest, by government trying to control the economy, rather than the real cost. Yep. And the oil price is kept low because certain things aren't factored in, such as the cost of foreign wars in order to secure it. So it's an arbitrary figure, and it will be pushed as far as governments suspect the population will actually accept.
Yeah, I did go along a bit with that. I mean, the IEA's report last month said there was 624 billion of subsidies into the fossil fuel market, and was arguing, why on earth do we still go along with that charade and not put that into sustainable energy support? Well, that's because we have a group of fairly weak-kneed politicians across the world in actually dealing with that issue. The overall issue with peak oil, I like to refer to it as plateau oil, rather, because I think peak gives you like you're falling off the cliff. You know, we're going to get up to a level of production, 88, 89, possibly 90 million barrels a day, and then it will start to decline. I mean, even the CEO of Total has said he can't see getting much over 90. I know that the BP guy talks about being up near 100, but I think that's all eyewash. It's going to be in the sort of 85 to 90. It comes back to your point, actually. Governments then interfere by stockpiling and controlling it, and actually managing the resource. So you'll see people releasing stocks to try and keep the oil price down. And you'll have direct subsidy. When the Chinese and the Indonesian have had direct subsidies for their oil users. So there's going to be manipulation.
There's a film coming out sometime later this year, which I think might be quite interesting in the process of educating yourself, And I think it has the rather memorable title of Greedy Lying Bastards. and it's about the oil industry.
That's right.
So, one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, just as a sort of final comment, I mean, Geoscience was set up by a group of us from the School of Mine, which was a mix of students and some staff, in '85 to actually do geothermal on an industrial scale. And we've worked Japan, America, Indonesia, Australia, anywhere but here it would appear. And it's gone fine. But the market generally, because we have skills allowing us to do these deep wells and fancy wells, our biggest market now, believe it or not, we have a customer base of oil companies who want to go and get little bits of gas, little bits of oil. We've even got coal mining companies coming back saying, can you drill your fancy holes down through these deep coal seams and the rest of it? The emphasis on renewable energy and sustainable energy in the marketplace has evaporated. That is, you know, after 40 years of proselytising geothermal energy, that is a fairly big kick in the teeth. It'll come back. All right.
Thank you very much.